Already on. So, can I ask you first of all to tell me a little bit about the Global Africa set-up and the vision for it?
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind Global Africa is really to bring together academics that are working in different parts of Africa and in some way on different issues and different aspects, but are all ultimately focused around development, particularly around the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have some colleagues who are working on issues around gender and education, health and security, violence against women and girls. So really it's about generating conversations between us that are really rooted in our case study experiences of working in different parts of Africa. So we have colleagues who are working in Mozambique, in the DRC, in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Malawi, in Kenya, and lots of different African contexts. So it's really understanding the differences but also the synergies. And the global element of all of that is really, well, two strands to it. Understanding the impact of global development goals, so the sustainability goals, which really represent a global drive to try and eradicate poverty, and Africa is a particular focus of that, with some of the most poorest nations in the whole world being in the African continent. So the second element of that is to understand Africa's place in this increasingly interconnected world, and really to understand the prominence of certain African and countries and the development that's really being nurtured across Africa in more of a sort of grassroots way, and to look at the challenges or the clashes that might come out of that in terms of the impact of outside influences through the Global Development Goals and external economic development, and a drive for Africa to structurally adjust and to look like other parts of the world, and the resistance from within Africa to that kind of drive, compared with the sort of more national and pan-African approaches to really nurturing Africa's future into the future. Having said that, of course, Africa is not some kind of homogenous entity, and it's incredibly diverse, and that's really by bringing colleagues together and through this project we've been able to really have some dynamic and exciting conversations about those differences and pull out some lessons. It's important to pull out learning opportunities from our various case studies. So examples of access to justice programs that might have worked in one context, is it possible that they could also work in a different, in a new African context? So it's really also about building an evidence base that supports the drive from within African countries to really move forward in a way that supports their own goals.
And is this initiative very much based upon the researchers at University of Portsmouth, or in what ways could others engage with those who are involved?
So the principal members of Global Africa at this moment are the University of Portsmouth, but we are all involved in external projects that involve colleagues from different higher education institutes, but also from consultancy firms to large development agencies. So the idea is that it becomes a vehicle that really grows a network of committed practitioners and scholars who are working in different ways to really drive forward with development activities in different parts of the African continent.
Thank you. And the website that we've set up and that we're now launching is called Gender in Global Africa. So is there a gender aspect across the board with this?
So gender's everywhere. So gender's a really important lens through which to think about development, to understand the problems on the ground, but also to measure impact. So that's why we've put gender really at the forefront of the title in the blog, to just almost remind ourselves that that really is at the heart of the analysis and the framing of the research and the thinking that we're doing. So projects that I'm involved in South Sudan, I'm looking at gender mainstreaming across DFID's Harris, the humanitarian relief programming in South Sudan, so looking at how gender is informing or not informing the way in which programs are put together, and how it could be more comprehensively embedded into design and implementation. So that's one example, but I have colleagues that are working in education, looking at the impact of teenage pregnancy on girls' educational attainment and retainment in terms of staying on at school. I've got colleagues who are working in Global Africa, looking at women's health, maternal and child nutrition is one important topic that a colleague is looking at in the context of Malawi. So all of us in some way have got this focus on gender, which really drives the way that we think about development issues on the ground.
You mentioned the Harris project, and I was just going to ask if you personally are involved in a lot of projects that are focused in Africa and that fall under the Global Africa agenda.
Yeah, so I've spoken about South Sudan, but I'm also involved in a project in Sudan, which is looking at female genital mutilation and thinking about different entry points in terms of really ending FGM. So I have a couple of PhD students who are AFAD University for Women in Khartoum, and they're looking in different ways at mindset change. So they're looking at what might be the triggers to shift somebody from endorsing and continuing with FGM to really challenging it. So they're looking at household levels, at family dynamics, the relationships between men and women and across generations, to really try and get some insights into what might work. So how programming should position itself to really be as effective as possible. So those are the two main African projects that I'm working on at the moment. But I have also worked on projects in Rwanda looking at the one-stop centre approach to responding to gender-based violence. So centres that encase everything from legal advocacy to medical support to psychological support. So I've conducted work looking at the emergence of this approach and thinking about how effective it is.
Thank you very much.
Are we done? But anyway,
as I say, we can kind of just
Yeah.
use it or lose it depending on how we
Yeah.
feel when we review it.